Hello, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to my office. Come in, pull up a chair, have a seat, and let's talk. How many people do you know that you can really confide in? Tell them anything. There was an article that appeared in the Washington Post, and this, I don't know how I missed it at the time, but it came out 2 years ago, and it said at that time, 1 person in 4 had no one that they could talk to about personal troubles. No one. I guess they'd have to go find themselves a psychologist and pay him by the hour to go talk to him about their troubles. The article said that there's a comprehensive new study at the time that paints a sobering picture of an increasingly fragmented America where intimate social ties that were once seen as an integral part of daily life and associated with a whole host of psychological and civic benefits are shrinking or non-existent. In bad times, far more people seem to just suffer alone. And I'm willing to bet that, I don't know how that number will vary, but I'm willing to bet that an awful lot of you have been through something like that, at least periodically, if not for a long period of time. The study concluded that increased professional responsibilities, including working 2 or more jobs, which a lot of people increasingly have had to do in order to make ends meet, and long commutes have left many people too exhausted to seek social as well as family connections. Now, this had gotten to serious proportions even before we hit the hard times we're facing now. And I don't know what people are going to do now. Because, you're working 2 jobs, you're working 16 hours a day. What are you going to do? You've got to sleep sometime. Now, there's a huge difference between family and friends relationships now and what we had during the Great Depression. Families were closer. There were people around. I mean, you could relate to people. Chances were not all that bad that you might even know someone who could give you something out of his garden to eat. Now, I don't know where you go for that. Robert Putnam, who's a professor of public policy at Harvard, he wrote a book about the increasing socialization in the United States. And it's just happening. People are day by day becoming more and more isolated. And it makes me wonder a bit about the fragmentation of society in general, and if it has something to say about the way politics have gone in the modern world, that people are so much at odds with one another, we are so isolated we can't even talk anymore about stuff. I noticed something at the feast this year I didn't entirely understand. It was, hands down, the warmest feast I have ever been to. And I don't know where that came from. And it may be that the sense of being scattered, the awareness that we're out there by ourselves, has made us all the more appreciative of the chance, maybe the one chance in a year a lot of us have got to be together. I noticed something else this year, an increased restlessness among young adults, discussing it and wondering about it and not entirely understanding it. Someone even called it a kind of an unfocused anger on the part of those kids. Frankly, if I were seeing my future disappear in a huge financial crisis, not of my making, I'd be angry too. And I can see how that at an age when you're just getting ready to get started making your mark, to all of a sudden not to find anything to put the mark on, yeah, I would be angry too. And the anger is all the worse because it seems like there's so little that can be done about it. And it's fascinating to me how without the internet and without even a good mail system, the first Christians managed to give the kind of support to one another that they needed. It's an interesting thought, really. They didn't have anything, you don't have any idea how hard it was to send a letter from Jerusalem to your friend in Rome. It didn't just happen like that. They did send them, but generally somebody had to take the letter in his hand, go down to the sea, get on a ship, sail to Rome, go and hand it. I'm really struck when I read the epistles about how personal they were. You should notice, it's easy to notice all the personal references, especially in Paul's epistles. That last chapter of Romans mentions no less than 35 or so people by name. Greet Priscilla and Aquila. Greet this person. Greet that person. This person salutes you. And back and forth this go. These people knew each other from halfway around, no, not halfway around the world, but certainly halfway across the Middle East from each other at that time. When I read the epistles, I'm always struck by the communication between people and churches and how many of them knew people that were a long way off. I suppose because they had to work so hard at it, they had more friends. The easier things are to come by, the less appreciated they tend to become. Maybe there's something in that we ought to think about. The article mentioned how many connections people have through Facebook, emails, and all this kind of stuff. But these seem to be light touch, not people you really talk to. And you can't hug an email. Doesn't work. We really carry a burden for all you folks who are out there scattered around far and wide. We know how you feel, and we want to do what we can. And I suppose it's this sort of thing that lies at the root of something Paul wrote to the Hebrews. I think about it a lot these days. It's in chapter 10, verse 24. Let's consider one another to provoke unto love and to good works, not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together as the manner of some is, but exhorting one another, and so much the more as you see the day approaching. The implication of this is that we really need the long conversations. We really need the human touch. We need to be together, not just by telephone, although I think some people can have some good long conversations by phone, and it's meaningful. But you can't see the face. You can't see facial expressions. You can't see a distress arising in the eyes of the people you're talking to as you go down a certain pathway in the conversation. People just need to be together. I think some sense of isolation arises because of religious exclusivism. We are the true church, and you are not, some people think. You'd be surprised, maybe you wouldn't be, how many churches believe that if you aren't one of them, you're going to hell when you die. I call exclusivism and authoritarianism the devil's Siamese twins. It's interesting, they always seem to be joined at the hip. I know people who have rejected the authoritarian approach, but they haven't been able to shake the exclusivism. It's amazing to me how it hangs on. Some people end up alone with no one at all to confide in because they think they don't know any other true Christians. And maybe they don't know Christians because they haven't been looking for them. I think that's an unfortunate state of affairs. And it still affects some members of a broken church that some of us know all too well. If you find yourself with no like-minded church to attend, just take the one nearest your house and go there. See what's there. Find out if there are people there. I mean, you should find out. Don't just take because somebody said so. Find out if there are people there who happen to worship the same Jesus. I know, for example, when I left the Baptist church many, many years ago and came to the church that I'm in now, I didn't change my God. I didn't change my Christ. I didn't change any of that. I just changed my understanding and my associations with these things. So what if people don't understand Jesus perfectly? Neither do you. Let's face it. And for all you know, there may be people there whom you're being sent there to help. And for all you know, you may find someone there that can tell you something you don't know. You might find that they might meet some needs that you have. If you don't feel at home there, well, try another church a block further down the same street, because in most towns around here, you don't have far to go to find the second closest church to your house. Now, about your feelings of isolation and loneliness, which will come to all of us from time to time. It's pretty easy in the modern world to feel alone and forsaken. Nursing homes are full of people whose kids don't come to see them anymore. It's one of the saddest things. When I have visited people in nursing home and sit down and talk with them, and I learn that they have family members, they have kids, and they haven't seen them in who knows when, because they just sort of warehouse their parents or their grandparents, and they don't have a need for them, and so they don't go see them. And it may come as a surprise to realize what a treasure trove of sympathetic figures, people who understand us or would understand us, that we find in the Bible. From Elijah in the cave on Mount Sinai, here's this guy who called down fire from heaven, killed a bunch of people for worshiping Baal, then had to run for his life from a woman he found alone in a cave on the side of a mountain. And he's up there and he says, God says, what are you doing here, Elijah? He said, I've had to run away. There's nobody left here. They all have forsaken God. They're going after Baal, and now they're trying to kill me. I'm the only one left, and they're trying to kill me. And God says, no, you're not. You're a long way from the only one left. There are 7,000 I have reserved for me that have not bowed the knee to Baal in Israel. So he gave him a job to do and sent him out of that cave back into the world to do his job. So you go from him, you can come all the way down to David, who could be isolated and feel isolated in a palace full of people. There are all kinds of people around, but David sometimes felt just totally alone and desolate. It happened to him. Solomon, he could be isolated with 1,000 women down the hall in his palace. Apparently, he couldn't talk to any of them. Times like these that men sat down and wrote what, for want of a better word, I would call letters to God. They took pen in hand, they found themselves a quiet spot, and they sat down and wrote the letter and said, Dear God, how in the world have I gotten into this situation? Why am I here? Why is this going on? It's a curious thing about the Psalms. Many of them are prayers. Some of them are songs to be sung. But what is fascinating to me, always has been, is that they were written down and we still got them. After who knows how many, hundreds and thousands of years, that those things have been moldering away somewhere, and yet somebody cared enough to hang on to them. Can you write a letter to God? Can you write a prayer to God? Yeah, David did. Lots and lots of them. And we've got them. And because he wrote them, we find someone we can relate to. What makes us think that we can relate to a king? But you see, we can. Because he is just as human as we are. Take the 10th Psalm as an example. David starts the psalm by saying, Why do you stand way off, God? We need you. We need you here. We need you now. What are you doing somewhere else? He says, why do you hide yourself in times of trouble? And I think that in some words, of our own words and so forth, a lot of people wonder that to this day. They say, well, why is God letting this happen the way that it's happened? Why is this going on? It resonates with me. I feel that I live in the midst of a nation that doesn't want God in their lives or in their thoughts. Oh, there are people who do, but not the whole government. We have a government that's beginning to look and sound more like a religion without a God. I want you to keep that thought in your mind as you read the news, read your news magazines, and watch the news on television. Because a religion has certain characteristics, observable characteristics. And where there is a God who grants freedom, we are free to carry out our religion in society and do a lot of good in society as well. Now, when you have a government that begins to turn itself into a religion, carrying out a lot of religious functions, but with no God allowed in the door, you've got a problem. Even a king cannot change the hearts and minds of men. And so, David wrote a song about them. He continued in that 10th Psalm. The wicked in his pride does persecute the poor. Let them be taken in the devices they have imagined. For the wicked boasts of his heart's desire. He blesses the covetous, whom the Lord hates. The wicked, through the pride of his countenance, will not seek after God. God, he never even gives God a second thought. His ways are always grievous. Your judgments, God, remember, he's writing a letter to God. Your judgments are far above out of his sight. As for his enemies, he blows smoke at them. The wicked, through the pride of his countenance, he says in his heart, I shall not be moved. I shall never be in adversity. And a lot of times they grow old and die and aren't ever in adversity. Another psalm says, when the vilest of men are exalted, the wicked walk. It's been a long time ago when it first really dawned on me that David, some of his psalms are pretty rough. Some of the, talks about breaking the teeth of the wicked, putting gravel in their teeth, breaking their legs. I mean, it's bad stuff. But have you ever noticed he doesn't name these people? He always speaks in terms of a category of people. And to actually reach the category of the wicked, you've got to be pretty bad. You really do. These are people who deliberately, maliciously, and continually do evil to other people without giving it a second thought. So David says, here is a category we will call the wicked. And this is the way they look at life, and this is the way they treat people. This is the way they treat the poor. And he feels totally justified in asking God to look at that category of people and break their legs for them. And that's precisely what he does. Sometimes, in our isolation, it seems that the whole society is wicked. David sure thought so. In the 14th Psalm, this one is written, he says, the fool has said in his heart, there is no God. They're corrupt. They've done abominable works. There is none that does good. The Lord looked down from heaven upon the children of men to see if there were any that did understand and seek God. There weren't. They are all gone aside. They are altogether become filthy. There is none that doeth good. No, not one. It's amazing. Now, if we are isolated, it is easy for us to fall into that way of looking at the world. Logically, we know it can't be quite that way. In Elijah's day, it wasn't. Even in the case of Sodom and Gomorrah, God found Lot down there to get out of the place. He was a righteous man. But the problem with us is, like Elijah, we're in our cave when we ought to be out in society looking for people who are looking for God. We ought to be in touch. Paul must have been a little discouraged, I think, judging from the letter he wrote. Judging from the situation that Luke described in Corinth. You'll find it in Acts 18. The Apostle Paul left Athens and came to Corinth for his first time he ever went there. He came to them. He found a certain Jew named Aquila, born in Pontus, lately come from Italy with his wife Priscilla. And because Claudius had forced all the Jews out of Rome. Anyway, he came to them, and because he was of the staff, he abode with them and worked, for by their occupation they were tent makers. What a difference this fine couple, Aquila and Priscilla, make in the early church. They keep cropping up here and there. They seem to be catalysts in the early church in the things that they are able to make work, because they are the ones that actually provided the foundation for the work Paul was going to do in Corinth. They actually are the ones who took Apollos in hand and got him straightened out on some issues of the gospel. These people, Priscilla's and Aquila's, are always around somewhere. Sometimes we don't know where they are. Anyway, Paul reasoned in the synagogue every Sabbath and persuaded the Jews and the Greeks. Now, I don't know if that registers on you or not, but I think it may run a little counter to what some people think. Where was he reasoning? In the synagogue. Who was he reasoning with? Jews and Greeks. These were God-fearers who attended synagogue because they believed in God. Well, when Silas and Timothy came down from Macedonia, Paul was pressed in the Spirit, and he testified to the Jews that Jesus was the Christ. And when they opposed themselves and blasphemed, he shook his clothes and said, well, your blood be on your own heads. I'm clean. I'm going to the Gentiles. And he went to his house next to God. His house was right next door to the synagogue. And this is really interesting. Crispus, the chief ruler of the synagogue, believed on the Lord with all of his house. And many of the Corinthians, hearing, believed and were baptized. What does that mean? They were Gentiles. So here we go. In spite of everything, though, Paul must have been a little discouraged because of what happens next. You'd think he was feeling good, but Paul, it really wore on him the way the Jews responded to the gospel. And I understand it. After all, he was a Jew of the house of Judah in the sense of living there. He was a Benjamite, but they were his countrymen. And they were day after day, rejecting the truth, rejecting the gospel. It got him down. But the Lord spoke to Paul by night in a vision. And he said, don't be afraid. Speak. Hold your peace. Your peace. Sorry, I got that one wrong. Then spoke the Lord to Paul by night in a vision, be not afraid, but speak, and hold not your peace, for I am with you. No man will set on you to hurt you. Now, I don't think he would have said that unless Paul was somewhat concerned about it. And after all, he had a lot of scars on his body by this time. He had been through a lot of stuff. And God says, don't worry. Nobody's going to hurt you here, for I have much people in the city. Who knew? How would you ever make a guess looking at that town, in that generation, that God had a lot of people in that town? Well, he continued there 1 year and 6 months, teaching the Word of God among them. So Paul only knew that handful of people, Jews and Greeks, who attended the synagogue. But the 7,000 were there. That number is ideal, by the way, that God uses with Elijah. I don't think it was 6,900, more than that. Anyway, there were people there. There was a remnant there, and Paul had a lot of work to do to reach that group of people. Now, again and again in the Bible, you find David struggling with his loneliness. In the 139th Psalm, he said, O Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know my downsitting. You know my uprising. You understand my thought before I even come over the horizon. You compass my path and my lying down, and you're acquainted with all my ways. There is not a word in my tongue, but you, O Lord, know it altogether. You think you're alone? Hardly. I mean, God knew what time David went to bed. He knew what time he got up in the morning. He knew whether he slept or whether he didn't sleep. And there wasn't a word he ever said that God did not know what he said. He said, you have beset me behind and before. You've laid your hand on me. Now, he said, I can't get my mind around this in the modern vernacular. He says, this is too wonderful for me. It's high. I can't get it. Where am I going to go from your spirit? Where shall I flee from your presence? If I go up into the heavens, you're there. If I make my bed in hell, behold, you're there. If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, your hand will lead me and your right hand shall hold me. So, there you are in your cave. God knows where you are. He knows precisely where you are. He knows precisely what you're doing. He knows what time you go to bed. He knows what time you get up. So you are not alone. He says, you possessed my reins. You have covered me in my mother's womb. What a tremendous thing to understand. That here's a man in his mother's womb that God has his hand on him right there. I will praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are your works, that my soul knows all too well. My substance was not hid from you when I was made in secret and curiously wrought in the lower parts of the earth. Poetic language. What he's saying is that from the very, very beginning of the formation of what became David, you were there. Your eyes saw my substance yet being unperfect, and in my book, in your book, all my members were written, which in continuance were found. None of them. Now you do understand this, that once the sperm joins the egg with the egg, and an embryo is formed, from that day forward, everything new was there. You didn't have fingers, but they were written in God's book. God's book is your DNA. It's that little helix in there that does the whole thing. All the code that is going to make you blue-eyed, brown-haired, 6-footer, whatever it is, all that code is right there as you are being formed and before any part of you has taken any shape at all. That's what he's saying. How do you know that? Well, he did. How precious are your thoughts to me, O Lord. Great is the sum of them. If I should count them, they are more in number than the sand. When I awake, I am still with you. That takes a lot of faith, doesn't it? Because a lot of mornings when you wake up, you don't feel like God is there. And you wonder if he was there, why have I got a hangover? Why am I feeling so bad? Why am my bones so stiff? Why do I have to spend the first half hour of every day straightening myself up? Why is, if God is with me, you store because of your life up until this time. How can we say how this type of stuff? It does. It happens. It's given to us. We get to overcome it. But don't make any mistake. When you wake up in the morning, God is with you. You are not alone. Surely you will slay the wicked, God. David thinks a lot about the wicked, I think. Why not? They were around him all the time. I should think that you and I wouldn't have any trouble remembering the wicked if we watch television news. Anyway, surely you will slay the wicked, O God, And he turns to the bloody men and says, "Get away from me, you bloody men, for they speak a name in vain. I hate them, O Lord, that hate you." I think that's permissible. We're not supposed to hate people. But when you got people that hate God, David says, it's okay. Am I not grieved with those that rise up against you? I hate them with a perfect hatred. I count them my enemies. Search me, O God, and know my heart and know my thoughts, and see if there's any wicked way in me, and lead me in the way after everlasting. You know, this particular psalm found its way into an old hymn we used to sing a lot. And it's been on my mind, all these 50-plus years since I first began to pray this way and think about it. And it's really intimidating, in a way, to go to your prayer closet and get on your knees and open your prayer, talking to God, and then say, "Search me. Try me. Check to see if there's any wicked way in me, and let's deal with it. I don't want to be hanging out here. I don't want to be, turning away from you." Now, one of the things that's interesting, David so often reflects the feelings of Jesus, and it's obvious to me that the Holy Spirit intended it to be so. I was struck not long ago in reading on what Jesus had to say and did in Gethsemane, how he brought his disciples with him, how he wanted them to stay awake, and he brought a couple of them even so close to him, he was far away, and I think they could even hear him as he prayed, because he prayed aloud. And he didn't want to be alone. It's obvious when you read it. He just didn't want to be alone. In this last night, before he would suffer and he would die, he wanted someone to be there with him. And his feelings were long before that echoed by David in the 22nd Psalm. And this is one which you kind of have to read with a full realization of Gethsemane in your heart and your mind. Not that any of us are going to Gethsemane, a personal Gethsemane. But we all have our moments. We all have our black dog that gets on us from time to time. We all feel sometimes mistreated, very alone, sometimes very much out of touch with anybody. And David, in the 22nd Psalm, cried out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Well, God hadn't forsaken him, but he sure felt like God had. When he wrote this, or he wouldn't have written it. "Why are you so far from helping me and from the words of my roaring? Oh, my God, I cry in the daytime, you don't hear. I cry in the night season, I'm not silent. I'm calling out to you." If you think about this, these are the words that Jesus said on the stake. My God, why have you forsaken me? But you are holy, O you that inhabit the praises of Israel. Our fathers trusted in you. They trusted and you delivered them. They cried and they were delivered. They trusted and were not confounded. But me, I'm a worm and no man, a reproach of men, despised by the people. All they that see me laugh me to scorn. Shoot out the lip. They shake the head, saying, he trusted in the Lord, he would deliver him. Let him deliver him, seeing he delighted in him. It doesn't take any great insight to realize that this is about Jesus. Certainly, the librettist of Handel's Messiah saw it clear as crystal, because there is that marvelous section. He trusted in the Lord that he would deliver him. Let him deliver him, seeing he delights in him. But you are he that took me out of the womb. You did make me hope when I was upon my mother's breasts. I was cast upon you from the womb. You are my God from my mother's belly. I mean, you don't get any more personal than this, folks. And the thing that I always am struck by when I think about the nativity of Jesus is the humanity and the reality of even such things as you took me out of the womb. You made me hope upon my mother's breasts. You are my God, far from me. Trouble is here, and I can't find anybody to help. Ever felt that way? Yeah, you have. He said, many bulls have compassed me about. Strong bulls of Bashan have beset me around. They gaped upon me with their mouths like a ravening and roaring lion. I am poured out like water. All my bones are out of joint. And I would certainly think so. Hanging on that stake, Your bones out of joint. My heart is like wax. It is melted in the midst of my bowels. My strength is dried up like a potsherd. My tongue cleaves to my jaws, and you have brought me into the dust of death. Dogs have compassed me. The assembly of the wicked have enclosed me. They pierced my hands and my feet. I can't think of any earthly reason why David would have said that, if it weren't the Holy Spirit looking ahead to Jesus. I may tell all my bones. They look and stare at me. They part my garments among them, and they cast lots upon my vesture. Oh, don't be far from me, O Lord, my strength. Make haste to help me. Deliver my soul from the sword. You know, you think about this for a minute. You felt forsaken. You have felt alone. How alone would he have felt hanging there on that stake in the Middle Eastern sun, dying, knowing what was coming? On that terrible night in Gethsemane, an angel appeared encouraging Jesus, who apparently needed it. Well, David had his ups and downs, and shepherd that he was, he wrote that wonderful psalm, which kind of serves as a cure for loneliness for just a lot of people. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in the paths of righteousness. You got to follow that lead, but the lead will take you where you need to go. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. For you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You know, though, here's the thing about this. You probably don't feel that way today. If you were to face walking through the valley of the shadow of death, you probably would fear. This is where we are supposed to come. And the road to becoming like this, we know. It's not that hard to find. It's a matter of the presence of God practiced in our life, the awareness of God, and realizing we got company every step of the way. You prepare a table before me right in front of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup runs over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. You know, I think maybe we should come out of our cave and reach out to the 7,000. We don't have a clue where they are. We don't know who they are in many cases. What can you do? Well, you go where people are. If you have a home where you can have people in, invite your neighbors over for a Bible study, serve them some coffee and cookies, you may be surprised how they would respond to that. And they don't have to agree with everything you believe. This is just one of these things. You start somewhere and create the fellowship. If you can do it at home, you can. If you don't have a place you can invite people, go to that closest church and visit them. Chances are, just like Corinth has someone in that church, open yourself up to other people. This is one of the great keys to this type of thing. People who make the friends the easiest are self-disclosing people. They'll tell you what's on their mind. Now, others will disappoint you from time to time. And let's face one other fact. You will also disappoint them. Real friendships, real godly friendships, oftentimes really boil down to our being able to handle those disappointments and loving one another in spite of them, which deepens a relationship. And I have one other word of advice. Don't rely solely on the internet for fellowship. It's a wonderful, valuable tool for learning and transmitting information back and forth and for staying in touch. It's a precious means of staying in touch when we're far away from people that we love. But you can't hug an iPod. And your computer has way too many sharp edges for you to enjoy hugging your computer. Get out of your cave. Find some people. Someone needs you. And whether you know it or not, you need them. We love you. You're in our prayers. Don't forget us.